the biggest mistake we can make when interviewing job applicants. In today's environment, we're all experiencing a great deal of difficulty in finding people to staff the open positions we have in our organization. In fact, just recently, the Wall Street Journal published an article entitled Help Really Wanted: No Degree, Work Experience, or Background Checks. And in the article, they talked about how many employers were easing their job requirements, speeding up the hiring procedures to survive in this labor market where there are many, many more job openings than job applicants. So there's a very real challenge for employers to maintain a balance between getting an employee now versus taking our time, following our procedures and guidelines, and carefully evaluating the risk potential and suitability of each candidate for the position that they are seeking. The problem, of course, is that when we cut corners and don't follow our protocol, we don't do a thorough background check, etc., we almost always pay for that mistake. In today's presentation, we're going to focus on one narrow element of the pre-employment interview, but it is a critical element, and that is developing the applicant's work history. So we're going to begin by showing you how two different interviewers interview the same job applicant and how they have very different approaches. And then we'll talk about the good and the bad between these two approaches. Here's interviewer one. I see from your application that for the last several years you worked for the ABC company. Is that correct? Yes, that's right. I see that you left that job because they wanted you to relocate. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Well, they had asked several employees to relocate to a new store they opened up 75 miles away on the north side of town. And that was too much of a commute for you to make every day? Yes, I mean, absolutely. Interviewer two. Jim, as I mentioned earlier, I would like to discuss with you your employment history. Obviously, we have both your resume and application, but I always like to talk to somebody about their employment history because people can always say more during an interview than they could ever put on a piece of paper. So, is that okay? Sure, I mean, that'd be fine. Are you working anywhere at the present time? No. What was your most recent job? I worked for the ABC company as an assistant manager at their Main Street location. Why did you leave that job? Well, I got into an argument with my boss. I mean, one thing led to another, and it was kind of a mutual thing, but I mean, he did ask me to leave. Did he say why he wanted you to leave? Not really. I mean, he said he had some employees who wanted to work in another location because of the way I treated them, but I don't know. I mean, I just know he said he had too many complaints about me from some of the staff. And did he say what kind of complaints he was receiving? Not exactly. I mean, I guess some of them were about the fact that I would yell at some of the staff in front of customers because of their job screw-ups. But my job was to make sure that everybody did what I wanted them to do. And if they couldn't do it, then I let them know in no uncertain terms. Now, these two interview examples illustrate one of the most important strategies in the interview of a potential new employee, and that is, do not feed back to them the information they provided on the application. Research has indicated that over 50% of applications contain falsified information. And the most common areas of falsification are degrees that the applicant earned, dates of employment with their respective jobs, their salaries, their job descriptions. They may falsify references, and most critically, falsify reasons for leaving jobs. So having said that, if we interview a job applicant on the assumption that the information in the application is true and correct, as interviewer one did, we're simply feeding back to them the information they provided, and we're not likely to learn anything of any real consequence. So instead, we should interview the applicant as though we know nothing about them and let them provide the information, if I can say it, from scratch, as though we have nothing. Now, I know all of you are thinking, well, wait a minute, we've got their resume and job application in front of us. But we can easily address that issue by making the following statement, which you heard interviewer two make. Jim, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to discuss with you your employment history. Now, obviously, we have your resume and application, but I always like to discuss someone's job history with them because people can always say more during an interview than they could ever put on a piece of paper. So is that okay? Sure, that'd be fine. Our first question regarding an applicant's work history should always be, are you presently employed? Forget the application, forget the resume. If they say yes, that's fine. We'll develop the details of the job, how long they've been there, when had they started, their different responsibilities, etc., and why they want to leave that position. If they say no, then of course we'll find out how long they've been unemployed, what was their last job, why did they leave that job, etc. We want to recreate their job history from scratch. The biggest mistake we can make in interviewing a job applicant is to feed back to them the information that they provided on their application. There are 4 basic questions that we should ask the applicant about every employer they've had in the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever your application asks them to provide. Who was your last employer, your previous employer? How long did you work for that employer? What were the specific dates? What were your duties and responsibilities with that employer, and why did you leave that job? Now, those are 4 basic questions that we should ask for every job they've held. There are many supplemental questions that are going to be very insightful, such as, in the last 5 years, have you been suspended by any employer? Have you received any written reprimands on a job? Were you disciplined by any employer in any way? Have you ever been asked to leave a job? Did you resign from a job because you anticipated you were going to be asked to leave? And if they say yes to any of these questions, of course, we're going to develop the details, what were the circumstances, etc. So conducting the interview based on the fact we know nothing about the subject on their work history, building it up from scratch, asking these 4 basic questions with the appropriate follow-up questions that you saw, certainly will take longer than just reiterating what we see on the application. But I will guarantee you will find out much more accurate information about the subject's job history, any issues they had, problems they had, etc. So as far as the key points today in this presentation, number 1, do not feed back to the applicant the information they provided on their application. Interview them from scratch as though you know nothing about them, you have no information at all, and build it from the bottom up. And you will learn much more about them. To learn more about pre-employment interviewing strategies, we have 2 programs that we offer. One is called the Reid Technique for Pre-Employment Interviewing Strategies. This is an online video program that you can purchase. And the second is a 3-hour virtual training program that we do several times a month called Hiring the Best Applicant Interviewing Techniques. Our website at reid.com will give you the dates of our training programs and more information on the online video program as well. So thank you very much for taking a few minutes to listen to this presentation.